Hello there. It's Friday, it's August the 6th, and it's Fridays with Father. And today, it's quite an important feast. Today is the feast of the Transfiguration of the Lord. Very often, in some ways, we celebrate this during one of the Sundays of Lent each year, but it has its own feast day, and today is the day. I didn't have the Mass here today, Father George did. But I said my prayers in that light because I like it. It's a good feast, and I just wanted to say a few words about the Transfiguration of the Lord. It commemorates that time when Jesus revealed his glory, if you like, to his nearest and dearest, his close disciples, on the top of a mountain, Mount Tabor in the Holy Land. And, for a brief moment, people saw the glory of Jesus transfigured in a blaze of white light, as it says, dazzling, if you like. And it was a great moment for them to be reassured on their journey of discipleship with Jesus. I do particularly like this feast because it does speak to all of us, especially, as we journey along in our faith life. We don't always feel it, right? We're not always like, full of energy for the Lord. And I don't always see the good things in others, and I struggle, with my daily prayer and things like that. We don't always feel it. And the same with the disciples, in the gospel for today, and the celebration of the Transfiguration. They must have had moments when they were not feeling it, and especially, when you look at it, Jesus dragged them all the way up to the top of a high mountain, before he actually revealed himself to them. You can imagine what they must have been thinking on the way, thinking, where are we going? What is this for? They must have had doubts because they're human beings just like you and me, and in some ways the reward is just that brief moment when they see him for who he really is, and they think, And there's a great line, you see, that comes from it, and one of the disciples says, it is good that we are here. It's good for us to be here, And I think that's a challenge for us all in our daily lives, no matter where we are, whether we're on the top of a mountain or the bottom of a mountain, or whether we're in a cloud, or whether it's raining, or whether we're halfway up the mountain, we're thinking, well, shall I continue? Have I got the energy to keep going? Or I'm tired, I've had enough. To be able to pray that at all times, that it is good for us to be here. To know that any given moment, at any given time in our life, it's a moment of grace and a moment of blessing, and that Jesus is with us. Whether we see him transfigured, or not, he's with us. And I think that's a very beautiful thought for us to ponder on a Friday morning. It's, the end of maybe a tough week for you all. And maybe you're looking forward to the weekend, or maybe you're not looking forward to the weekend, or maybe just today in and of itself is a challenge. Well, to be able to pray, it is good for us to be here as we are right now, at this very moment, as I'm sat here with Jonah asleep on the floor, trying to reach out to my parishioners and whoever cares to tune in, to be able to say it is good that we are here, a moment of grace, a moment of blessing. And I think that's what the Transfiguration is all about. And some of you may have been to the Holy Land, and so you know where I'm talking about, Mount Tabor, and what a wonderful place it is. And if you haven't been to the Holy Land, then I sincerely recommend that you go. And if you do go, you must not miss going up Mount Tabor, because it's quite a beautiful experience. It really is a holy mountain, and it is quite a big mountain, and you have to go up on a bus. You can't, you can, I suppose, go up on foot, but it'd probably take you all day to get there. But it's certainly worth a visit, and lots of pilgrims flock there. And I went there with my parents some years ago, and a group of pilgrims, and we celebrated Mass on that holy mountain, and we celebrated with great joy, the Jesus who transfigures himself, for us, who shows us his glory, and how he shows himself to us, most especially as believers in him through the Eucharist, in the presence of the consecrated bread and wine. So that's today's feast, the Feast of the Transfiguration of the Lord, and I recommend that you ponder it today. It is good for us to be here. The second thing I wanted to say today is a feast that already happened. It happened on, I think it was Wednesday, it was Wednesday. Yeah, and Wednesday was a feast of Saint John Marie Vianney, or more commonly known as the Curé of Ars, the priest from Ars, in France, from the early 19th century, a holy little man who was just a devoted pastor of his parish, who struggled, if you like, to actually become a priest, but did wonderful works, and he's still very much venerated to this day. And I've spoken to you about him before, but I would never miss an opportunity to mention him. In 1986, I think it was, I went to Ars with a group of fellow seminarians, and it was then anyway a small little farming village, but with a great big basilica in the middle of it, in honor of the Curé of Ars. And in it, the Curé of Ars, St. John Vianney, his body is still there, lying underneath the altar of the basilica, and his body is incorrupt. And you can see who he was. He was just a very small man, diminutive man, with a very kindly face, and his body is just lying there. A very beautiful experience. And I remember being there with my friends, and we spent the weekend, I think. And I remember getting up very early on a Sunday morning and going to Mass, not at the Basilica, but at a convent of Poor Clares. They had Mass like at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just remember the silence, and the light, which was kind of tenuous, and but most importantly, the celebration of Mass, Eucharist, and how I very much associate the Curé of Ars really with a great love and fondness for the Eucharist and for the Mass, and how that came home to me as I was in this small chapel of the Poor Clares back in 1986, because he, like so many of the saints, saw the Eucharist as like his main source of nourishment, the thing which fed him spiritually, and the most important thing to him. His devotion to the Eucharist was, exemplary. So I commend you to St. John Vianney. You can read lots of his story, his online biographies and such like that. One of the things which I always find fascinating is that is to do with his diet, and what he ate. As I say, he was very much devoted to the Eucharist. Now, in Ars, in the little village, there's a touristy little museum where they kind of like recreated his home where he lived when he was the pastor of Ars, and in it is a little kitchen, and in the corner of the kitchen is a sack of potatoes. And apparently, and there's no reason to doubt it, that he only ate potatoes. That was his diet, potatoes and the Eucharist. Now, we hear of saints practicing very ascetic and austere sort of practices in their life, really, in order to help them to focus more on Jesus, who was the most important thing in their lives. But so much so, sometimes you see, what they ate kind of reflected that austerity. So to us, the fact that he only ever ate potatoes, it seems almost like scandalous, in this day and age. But then I got to think maybe it wasn't so scandalous back then, in a peasant town in southwestern France, and where there probably wasn't a lot of money, and he lived among poor people, and he probably lived off what people produced on the land. So, he ate potatoes and very little else. I suppose, the fancy foods, that people eat now have a healthy diet, they may have been kale, but I suppose they gave that to the animals. But I mean, they probably, the fancy foods like quinoa and all that kind of stuff probably didn't exist back then, or fancy yogurts like what I buy. But he lived just on potatoes and the Eucharist. Again, focusing, that his main nourishment, his main sort of nutrition, really, was of the soul, and it was Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, which was most important to him. So I commend the Kyrie of ours to you, and I commend you to his prayers too, as I pray always through the saints that we celebrate throughout the week. And the Kyrie of ours has been a nice celebration to have this week here at Church of the Holy Spirit. There was one other thing I was going to say as I'm talking about Eucharist. It's quite funny, really. It was quite a funny story, but just to sort of maybe illustrate, the kind of, the restrictions by which we live at the moment because of COVID, and the difficulties we're having with, masking and not masking. And we were, free from masks, and now we're back into masks for the celebration here. And I suppose really we're just being asked to be extra careful, and we're trying to do that. However, I was stopped by somebody after Mass, a few weeks ago, and had a funny kind of encounter with that person. And it was all very, very nice and jolly and what have you, but it had an interesting point. And the person said to me, when you give me communion, Father, why do you drop it in my hand? Why do you drop the host in my hand? And I said to her, because I don't want to touch you. And we both laughed, and she said, but she sort of said, why don't you want to touch me? And I said, it's not that I don't want to touch you, it's just that because of COVID, I'm trying not to touch you. So when I'm distributing communion, and it may be just be particular to me, I try to place the host, on your hand, without having physical contact, so that, if you imagine, if I touch you, and then I touch another person, and another person, and another person, I don't want to be passing stuff along, and I don't want to be responsible for that, so I'm just trying to be extra careful. It might be completely unnecessary, and maybe it's just a psychological thing, but since we started this whole pandemic where we were, told to be so very, very careful, and we had face shields, and, I think initially we were using gloves to give communion and things like that. When I give people communion, I try to place it in such a way that it almost like can be seen to be that the host is falling into the palm of the person's hand. But we laughed, we seemed to say, I don't want to touch you. Why do you want to touch me? It's not that I don't want to touch you, it's just that I'm trying not to touch you for hygiene reasons, for COVID reasons, so that we can all be as sanitary, if you like, as we possibly can. But it's interesting the things that people pick up on, and I'm kind of glad that people take note and pay attention, really. But please don't be offended if it seems that I drop the host into your hand. I'm just trying to do it to keep everybody as safe as possible. There was one other thing I wanted to touch on really today, and that was another little activity we had today, this week called popcorn and popsicles, and it was lovely. It was really, really nice. It was only for like an hour and a half out on the lawn and the courtyard, and there were lots of young people, lots of children, and quite a few adults as well, the parents of the adults, and Joyce Wickland, was like the storyteller, and the animator and the teacher, and she did a wonderful job, and we all had a wonderful time, and I learned lots of different things about popcorn, which I didn't know before. And the special guest of honor was Jonah himself, who arrived with balloons, and he was interviewed by Joyce. And there was laughter, and there was music, and there was dance. It was just a jolly, if you like, hour and a half together with people, and I came away saying to Maria, who had been really responsible for organizing this, that we need to do more things like that. We need to do more things like that. And the reason why I say that is the following, slightly more serious. There were a crowd of like maybe, 50 to 70 people there. And some of the people I knew, but the vast majority I did not know, And first of all, I thought, well, this is a great way to reach out to people that we don't know. Then when I was asking around, because I've never seen these people at church, really. And admittedly, I'm still only here for a year or so, and the pandemic may have kept people away. But the vast majority of people were like young families with children. But when I was in conversation with people afterwards, it became apparent to me that a lot of the people there, a lot of the young families who were at this event were in fact children of committed parishioners at CHS. People who have come through CHS system and used to come to church with their parents, but now do not come. And I thought that's a very interesting phenomenon, really. But they were there for the popsicles and the popcorn and the storytelling and the fun with their family. And even though we don't have them at Mass here on Sunday. And I thought that was significant, and I thought it was beautiful, and that's the main reason why I think we need to do more of this. We need to do more of this to be able to reach out to those people who are in some ways alienated or distanced or busy doing other stuff, but a way to sort of maintain some kind of contact or outreach with them. I think that's vital to the survival, if you like, of the Catholic Church here at Church of the Holy Spirit. So that's why I think we need to do more of those activities, so that through them, little by little, we can have outreach and to be connected to them, and little by little, hopefully, bring them to Jesus, which is what we're about, is bringing people to Jesus. So they may not be coming to church now, but maybe, through our outreach, little by little, through these activities, some of them may come to Mass again and to be with Jesus in the Eucharist, with everybody else too. So I just tell you that, and that's why I'm so glad that so many people supported popsicles or popcorn and popsicles, and I really hope that we can do more of those things, similar things, and if it was your children that came to that event, thank you for getting them there, because it was great to have that connection through the sharing of an iced lolly and some popcorn. It was a great event. Okay, so that's more or less what I've got to say to you today. Just to remind you that this very evening at 6:30 we have Holy Hour, time before Jesus in the Eucharist. And if you can't come, you can send your petitions online, so that I can voice your prayers before Jesus on your behalf. All right? In the meantime, have a great weekend. Be joyful, keep the faith, and I will see you at church on Sunday. Bye-bye.